The stage is a vast, predatory ocean of light, and at its center stands a girl who looks as though she might dissolve into the floorboards. Courtney Hadwin is a portrait of painful, paralyzing stillness. A 13-year-old girl wrapped in a yellow suit that feels more like armor than attire. Her fingers twitch, a frantic Morse code of anxiety, as she stares into a void of judging eyes. The silence in the auditorium is not peaceful. It is heavy, suffocating, and expectant. It is the sound of 1,000 people waiting for a shy child to fail. But then, the first note of the music hits like a tectonic shift. The girl vanishes, and a spirit, raw, howling, and ancient, possesses her frame. It is a transformation that feels less like a performance and more like an exorcism. Yet, as the world erupts in deafening thunder, the girl behind the voice remains trapped in a silent scream of her own making. How does a child carry the weight of a legend's soul when she cannot even find her own voice in the quiet of a room? The backstage corridors of the Dolby Theater are a labyrinth of polished concrete and artificial light, a subterranean world where dreams are manufactured and anxieties are magnified. In this sterile expanse, the air is thick, saturated with the chemical sting of hairspray and the sharp, metallic tang of fear that clings to the back of the throat. Courtney Hadwin stands in a pocket of deepening shadow, a fragile silhouette wrapped in a yellow suit that feels less like a costume and more like a barrier between her soul and the devouring gaze of the world. She is 13 years old, yet in this moment, she carries the skeletal weight of an ancient burden. Her fingers do not merely shake, they dance in a frantic, involuntary Morse code against her thighs, telegraphing a distress signal that no one in the bustling crew seems to decode. To the producers and the hovering cameras, she is a high-stakes contestant, a potential variable in a primetime equation. To herself, she is a tectonic fault line, invisible but ready to fracture under the sheer atmospheric pressure of the moment. Every breath she takes is a shallow, jagged struggle. Her throat feels constricted, narrowed by years of being the quiet one, the child who existed on the periphery of conversations, swallowed by a world that equates silence with absence. This is the defining wound, the crushing, invisible weight of being a weird child in a society that fetishizes a very specific, polished brand of normalcy. Her internal landscape is a violent theater of war, a relentless conflict between the primal, crippling urge to vanish into the drywall and the agonizing, soul-deep necessity to finally be heard. She has spent her life being misunderstood, her shyness mistaken for a lack of substance, her hesitation viewed as a lack of drive. Now, the silence of the corridor is her greatest enemy. It is a vacuum that demands to be filled, yet she fears that once she breaks it, the seal on her private self will be gone forever. As a production assistant beckons her toward the stage, the floor beneath her feet seems to lose its solidity. The transition from the dim safety of the wings to the aggressive, blinding white light of the stage is a physical assault. She walks with a stiff, mechanical gait, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance that does not exist. There is a haunting, ritualistic quality to her movement. It feels as though she is walking toward an ancient altar, a place where the simplicity of her childhood is about to be systematically sacrificed for a fleeting moment of global greatness. The audience is a low, predatory hum in the darkness beyond the footlights. She reaches the center mark, a small X that feels like a target. Her heart hammers against her ribs, a drumbeat of impending transformation. She looks at the judges, her face a mask of paralyzing terror, her voice a mere whisper when she speaks her name. The music begins, a low rhythmic growl. We are left on the precipice of that first, soul-shattering scream, haunted by a singular, chilling question. If she finds her voice in this explosion of sound, will the world ever allow her the sanctuary of being quiet again? The narrative drifts away from the neon glare of Los Angeles, retreating across the Atlantic to the gray, bruised skies of County Durham. Here, the North Sea wind does not blow. It hunts, whistling through the utilitarian streets of Peterlee like a melody that was abandoned halfway through its composition. This is a landscape of muted colors and industrial ghosts, a place where the houses stand in identical rows, echoing a standard of conformity that Courtney Hadwin could never quite grasp. We see her here as a younger child, a phantom haunting the corridors of her own life. In the local school, she is the girl who sits at the very back of the classroom, her desk an island of isolation in a sea of easy social interaction. To the teachers, her intensity is frequently misread as defiance. To her peers, her heavy silence is mistaken for a vacancy of mind. They cannot see the storm raging beneath the surface, nor the way her mind seeks refuge in a time she never lived through. Her only true sanctuary is a cramped, upstairs bedroom where the air smells of old paper and dust. Here, she communes with the dead. She finds a desperate, visceral kinship in the scratched vinyl of the past, leaning into the gravelly, raw desperation of Janis Joplin and the kinetic, electric energy of James Brown. These are not merely songs to Courtney. They are the only languages that possess the vocabulary for her internal chaos. She listens until the lyrics are etched into her marrow, the walls of the small room vibrating with a vocal power she possesses, but does not yet know how to domesticate. When she sings along, her voice loses its stutter, its hesitation, its fear. But even in this sanctuary, a dark root of anxiety takes hold. She begins to realize that the person she becomes when the music plays is a stranger to the person the world knows. The fear is specific and sharp, the terrifying suspicion that if people ever truly see the raw, unbridled force inside her, they will look away in profound discomfort. She is a girl out of time, a soul born in the wrong decade, navigating a modern world that feels increasingly abrasive. We watch her in a quiet, domestic moment, her hand hovering over an application form for a talent search, a piece of paper that promises a bridge out of the gray. Her parents watch from the doorway, their faces a mixture of hope and a protective, unspoken dread. As the pen touches the paper, there is a sense of a door locking behind her. She signs her name, stepping toward a life that will change the chemistry of her world, tragically unaware that the thunderous applause of millions is often much louder, and far colder, than the quiet empathy she has always craved. Success does not arrive for Courtney Hadwin as a gentle, rising tide. It comes as a catastrophic flash flood, a sudden inundation that redefines the geography of her existence in a matter of seconds. The moment the golden buzzer is pressed, the atmosphere in the Dolby Theater shatters. Glittering gold confetti falls from the rafters like gilded rain, sticking to her skin and tangling in her hair, marking her as a chosen thing. In an instant, the shy, trembling girl from the north of England is no longer a person. She is a global property, a digital asset to be traded in clicks and views. The world watches the clip on repeat, marveling at the freakish transformation, yet beneath the celebratory noise, a profound and dangerous loneliness begins to take root. Fame is not a doorway, it is a glass cage, and Courtney has become its most exquisite and scrutinized exhibit. The transformation from child to phenomenon is a violent psychological whiplash. The media labels her a reincarnation and a viral sensation, stripping away the nuance of her humanity to fit a headline. The burden of maintaining this hyper-energetic, soulful persona is immense, a weight that presses down on her even when the cameras are dark. While other children her age are navigating the mundane, formative dramas of adolescence, first crushes, school exams, the slow discovery of self, Courtney is forced to navigate the staggering expectations of an international audience. We see her now in the liminal spaces of her new life, the sterile luxury of hotel rooms and the echoing halls of international airports. She walks with her head bowed low, the oversized hood of her jacket serving as a futile, soft shield against the predatory lenses of paparazzi and the burning stares of strangers who feel they own a piece of her soul. She is constantly surrounded by high-powered handlers, smiling judges, and frantic fans. Yet the isolation she feels is more profound and more suffocating than it ever was in the silence of her Peterly bedroom. In the bedroom, she was alone by choice. Here, she is alone by circumstance, a girl separated from her peers by a wall of sudden, inexplicable prestige. The trade-off for her voice begins to feel increasingly lopsided. She has found her stage, but she has traded away the right to be unremarkable. In a quiet moment on a private jet, she stares out at the clouds, her reflection in the thick glass looking tired, older than its years. The narration reflects on the hollow nature of this victory. She has become the voice of a generation's curiosity, but her own voice is still unheard in the ways that matter. As the tour dates pile up and the pressure mounts, the haunting question remains: will the roar of 1,000 crowds ever be enough to fill the expanding as the America's Got Talent machine grinds toward its inevitable conclusion? The frenzy surrounding Courtney Hadwin reaches a fever pitch that threatens to catastrophically crush her delicate psyche. The stage is no longer a place of catharsis. It has become an industrial obligation. Every performance is a high-wire act where the net has been removed. The internal struggle has evolved from a girl trying to find herself into a girl trying to survive her own reputation. The haunting question, "Can I do this?" has been replaced by a much more exhausting one. "Can I keep doing this?" The fear of a single cracked note, a faltering step, or a lackluster movement begins to haunt her every waking hour and bleed into her restless sleep. At 13, she is the primary engine for the financial and emotional hopes of her family, and a vital cog in the brand of a global television empire. The crown is made of lead. We witness the agonizing, private moments in the bowels of the theater where the performer mask finally slips. In the dim light of a dressing room, Courtney sits huddled in a chair, her hands trembling so violently she has to tuck them into her armpits to hide them from the hair and makeup team. She is a portrait of a child being slowly eroded by the expectations of adults. Tears track through her foundation, shed silently into her palms, and the shaking, once a symptom of pre-show nerves, now lingers long after the music has stopped. It is a neurological protest against the pace of her life. She is trapped in a profound identity crisis. She is a girl who cannot make eye contact in a hallway, yet she is expected to play a screaming, foot-stomping lion on live television. She begins to wonder which version of herself is the lie, and more terrifyingly, she wonders if the lion is all the world truly cares about. The shadow of a total psychological breakdown begins to loom over the production as the finale approaches. The air is thick with the tension of a ticking clock. To the public, she is the frontrunner, the one to beat. To the narrator, she is a vessel nearing its breaking point. Every interview is a minefield, every rehearsal a grueling test of her dwindling stamina. She looks at the other contestants, older, more seasoned, more resilient, and feels the vastness of her own youth like a terminal illness. The foreshadowing of a looming collapse is woven into every shot of her haunted eyes. As she prepares for the final performance, the stakes are framed not in terms of winning or losing a competition, but in terms of her very survival. If she wins, she belongs to the world's expectations forever, a permanent ward of the industry. If she loses, she faces the terrifying vacuum of being yesterday's news. She stands in the wings, the light catching the moisture in her eyes, facing a choice that is no choice at all. Who will be left when the lights finally go out and the applause stops? Void where her childhood used to be. The lights of the grand finale eventually dim, the credits roll, and the manufactured urgency of the television season evaporates into the night. For Courtney Hadwin, the deafening roar of the Dolby Theater and the frantic buzz of the cameras are replaced by a hollow, ringing silence that feels heavier than the noise ever did. The downfall she experiences is not the loud, explosive scandal of a Hollywood tabloid. It is something much more tragic and much more common. The slow, private erosion of a child's purpose. The transition from being the most talked about girl on the planet back to the mundane, gray reality of a teenager in northern England is a life-altering tragedy of the spirit. She returns home to find that the world has changed, and so has she, but the two no longer fit together. The music industry reveals itself to be a fickle and heartless master. The phone, which once rang with the frantic desperation of agents and producers, begins to go quiet. The viral moment, once a raging fire, begins to fade into the cool embers of a digital memory. Courtney is left standing in the quiet wreckage of her own meteoric rise, a survivor of a storm that passed as quickly as it arrived. She is forced to grapple with a profound and agonizing "what now?" as she navigates the hallways of a normal life that feels alien and small. The internal conflict is a relentless cycle of self-doubt that eats away at her confidence. She begins to wonder if she was ever actually talented, or if she was merely a glitch in the matrix, a curiosity whose shock value has been spent. Does anyone care about the girl who is beneath the scream, or were they only ever in love with the noise? This chapter delves deep into the psychological burden of being a former star before even reaching the age of 16. She retreats into herself. The social anxiety that once fueled her performance is now turning inward, manifesting as a near-total withdrawal from the world. We see her staring at her old costumes, now hanging like shed skins in her closet. She avoids the piano. She avoids the records that used to be her friends. The silence of Peterlee, once a sanctuary, now feels like a judgment. She is haunted by the fear that her best days are already behind her, that she is a ghost of a version of herself that the world has already consumed and discarded. The chapter ends with Courtney sitting in the dark of her room, her phone screen glowing with old comments from strangers, a young girl lost in the vacuum between who she was and who she is supposed to become. The final movement of the documentary is not one of grand, triumphant return, but of a somber, delicate reflection and a fragile, hard-won rebirth. We see Courtney today, several years removed from the golden buzzer that nearly broke her. She is older now. Her face has lost its soft childhood roundness, and her eyes hold a depth of experience and a weary wisdom that no young woman should possess. She is no longer the girl in the yellow suit. That suit is a relic, a costume from a play she no longer wishes to star in. She is haunted by that girl, but she is also learning how to forgive her. In the quiet of a new era, she is attempting to build a legacy on her own terms, far away from the predatory, soul-crushing glare of reality television. The music she creates now has a newfound meaning. It is slower, more deliberate, and tinged with a genuine, unvarnished sorrow of someone who has stood at the peak of the mountain and felt the biting cold of the descent. She is no longer trying to shock the world into paying attention. She is trying to heal the parts of herself that the world damaged. Yet, the emotional wounds are not neatly healed. They are merely managed. The social anxiety still flickers in her gaze during interviews, a shadow that never quite leaves her side. The fear of being enough, not for the charts, but for herself, remains her constant, whispering companion. She is a work in progress, a masterpiece of resilience that is still being painted over the jagged scars of her past. The documentary does not conclude with a stadium concert or a platinum record. Instead, it ends with a quiet, lingering shot of Courtney walking alone toward a microphone in a small, dimly lit recording studio. There are no judges, no cameras, no millions of viewers, just the wood grain of the floor and the soft hum of the amplifier. She takes a long, steadying breath, her hand trembling just a fraction as she adjusts the stand. This tremble is different. It is not the tremor of a victim, but the vibration of a string ready to be played. She begins to sing, and the voice that emerges is richer, darker, and more authentically her own. She is singing not for the applause, and not for the survival of a brand, but for the simple, desperate need to exist. The screen fades to black as her voice fills the room, leaving the viewer with a haunting, unresolved question. Can a soul that was once owned and commodified by millions ever truly belong to itself again, or is she destined to always be a ghost in her own story?